Let it begin.
And hold them in this density, hold them in this illusory reality. They are in this world and they are also of it. And therefore, the only information that they have to get a fix on how they see life themselves and reality in general is through the eyes and the ears. And who controls that? The Illuminati control that through what we laughingly call the education system, the mainstream media across the planet. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to disconnect us from multidimensional infinity so that we don't see the world from that perspective and therefore see through the illusion and see through the nonsense and see through the lies. And then once they've disconnected people, they then program this lower level of our consciousness with a reality that suits them. And this is why people who have had a different perspective on life, a different perspective on reality, who have held that connection to some extent out into the infinite, and have expressed that view, expressed that vision of reality and possibility here, they're the ones that are dubbed crazy, lunatics, and dangerous. Why? Not because they are, but because from the point of consciousness that they are perceiving this world, to people who are here, the vast majority, that is just crazy. I mean, if you said to people, is that table solid? They say, of course it is. Well, it isn't. It can't be. It's made of atoms, right? And atoms are not solid. Tell me how it does that. Our minds do that by turning vibrational fields into apparently physical objects. The denser the vibration, the slower the vibration, the more dense that we decode that into what appears to be a physical object. And so someone who's out there and can perceive that sees the world in a completely different way. And because it's different to the norm and the mass norm, which is programmed into people from cradle to grave, they're just isolated and called crazy. When in fact, they're the people we need to listen to.
Yeah, and, I remember Stanley Messenger. He said to me once that there are no objects, there are no things. Everything that, like for example, the wooden table, everything is an event, because once that was a tree, and in years to come that will be thrown away into a skip and it'll end up decomposing somewhere. We don't perceive that as an event because it's happening on a slow scale. But there are no things, there are only events.
Well, that table was once a tree, and when it was a tree, it was an illusion. Now it's a different kind of illusion, and when it's thrown on the scrap heap and goes back to energy as it decomposes, then it will still be an illusion. And this is for me, if you're talking about how we're controlled, how the few control the many, if you can suppress the information that people receive in terms of what is possible, you to the same rate suppress their perception of what is possible. Okay, now once you have accepted that what we're told is possible is how it is, then you're living in a box that big. So anyone that starts to talk about things that are beyond that perception of possibility, you immediately dismiss them as crazy. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. A few centuries ago, when people said the Earth was a sphere, they were perceived as crazy and dangerous. And one of the reasons was that if you lived on the bottom of a ball, you would fall off, right? Now, once you introduce the law of gravity, what appears at first sight to be a nonsensical idea becomes perfectly logical. However, if you suppress at that time knowledge of the law of gravity, then people are going to dismiss the truth because they can't perceive that the truth can be possible. And when you're talking about entities that shapeshift, that appear and disappear, UFOs that appear and disappear, if you program the population to believe that this world is all there is, that this is a solid world of solid individual objects, then the idea of things appearing and disappearing or shape-shifting from one state to another, to that sense of perception, is totally ludicrous. But once you introduce the suppressed knowledge, which is that this world is not solid, and what we're living in is basically symbolically a radio station, in terms of all the radio and television stations broadcasting to this place now are all existing in the space that I'm sitting in. I can't see them. They are not aware of each other unless they're really close on the dial, because they're on different frequencies. And if I'm on or something else is on a different frequency, a seriously different frequency to that wall, then I can walk through it, or something else can walk through it. Just as if I turn my radio on now, I tune into a radio frequency broadcast that's coming through this wall or this window. And so this reality that we think is so solid and all that there is actually like a radio station. And this physical body, this holographic illusion, locks us in, tunes us in like a radio to this radio station, to this reality.
After 200 years of Kabbalistic magic and bloodthirsty crusades, wantonly murdering children, women, and engaging in ritualized sodomy, the French Knights Templar were rounded up, tortured, and executed. Many confessions told of the Knights Templar monks ritually sodomizing each other, invoking evil spirits, and implanting these spirits into animals such as cats. Various black magic artifacts were confiscated from castles owned by the Knights Templar, including silver caskets containing desiccated heads and skulls. The Knights Templar referred to these heads as Baphomets. They were placed at the center of a round table. Templars would then conduct a séance invoking the spirit of Lucifer to speak through the head. The most damning information exposed them as anti-Christs. Several Knights Templar confessed that the image of Jesus was spat upon and trampled during Kabbalistic rituals, a satanic tradition which is still practiced to this day at lodges of the Ordo Templi Orientis, which was once headed by Aleister Crowley. Many Knights Templar bribed their way out of prison and escaped to Scotland and the Mediterranean island of Malta. They first renamed themselves the Sovereign Knights of Malta, and then, after establishing trade routes to North America long before Christopher Columbus, they re-emerged in Scotland, calling themselves Freemasons. All versions of Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, the Skull and Bones, the Palladian Rite of Freemasonry, Co-Masonry, Scottish Rite Masonry, the Ku Klux Klan, and Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis are derived from the original Kabbalistic rituals of the Knights Templar. The Kabbalistic banishing ritual of the pentagram was in part performed by Queen Elizabeth II during her coronation ceremony in 1952. The ritual was based on the lesser banishing of the pentagram ritual designed by Aleister Crowley for the Golden Dawn secret society.
There comes now yet another ancient ceremony. The great officers of state, and the bishops, and the nobles who have borne the swords, the scepters, and other regalia, move to the steps of the throne, which stands upon its dais. This throne, like the raised floor of the theatre itself, is descended from those days 1,500 years ago, when the early kings sat for their crowning upon a mound of earth. So today, the Queen will ascend the steps of her throne, there symbolically to be lifted into it by the Archbishop and the Earl Marshal, in the sight today of a great multitude of people. It is at the moment that she is seated upon her throne that she takes possession of her kingdom.
During the 1930s and 1940s, the OTO Lodge in California was headed by a brilliant young rocket designer called Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons developed patented rocket technology which is still in use by NASA to this day. NASA named a crater on the dark side of the moon in honor of Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons worked during the day to develop rocket propulsion systems which would serve NASA's space program, which was controlled by ex-Nazi SS officers such as Werner von Braun, who had been brought to the USA by the CIA's Project Paperclip. at night. Jack Parsons would hold sex magic rituals in his house in Pasadena and initiate fellow scientists at the Los Alamos Atomic Bomb Laboratory. Jack Parsons was fully aware of what his rocket designs would eventually be used for. Not far from Jack Parsons' rocket lab in Pasadena, Robert Oppenheimer was building the world's first atom bomb, which would be exploded at Los Alamos, near a place called the Road of Death, which lies on the 33rd degree parallel. Once installed as the head of the OTO's American operation, Jack Parsons conducted a giant satanic ritual, aided by a fellow OTO member with the codename Freighter H. In 1948, the same year that George Bush Sr. was baptized as Magog, Jack Parsons undertook one of the most dark rituals known to Kabbalists, the Babylon working. This ritual requires the initiate to visualize the Kabbalistic tree of life, with its 10 spheres and 22 connecting pathways. Between the top 3 spheres and the lower 7 spheres, there is the so-called abyss, the place where one's personality, possibly even one's sanity, is potentially destroyed. If the initiate successfully spans the abyss with personality intact, then he becomes a black brother of the Kabbalah, a black magician of the so-called left-hand path. In the tradition of Judaic mysticism, these black magicians are utter evil and are in themselves pestilence. This giant Babylon working ritual saw Parsons, aided by his magical protege, Freighter H, project their astral bodies into the dark abyss of Lucifer.
Let it begin.